All right, good evening or good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of Grizzly's Cave. This is Grizzly Andrew, and today we're just going to continue on the series that I started about the late Hayabusa. But before I get to that, I do want to remind the fans that the next Gnaw Wrestling event, excuse me, will be December 13th at 7 p.m. at the Nebo Community Center in Nebo, Kentucky. Doors will open at 6 p.m. Ticket prices are as follows. Free for anyone ages 0 to 5, $5 for anyone ages 6 to 12, and $8 for anyone ages 13 and up. Concessions will be available. It is a family-friendly promotion, and I promise folks you will not be disappointed. And also, I mentioned on the previous episode, and I may wind up setting up something through my Cash App, PayPal, and Venmo as well. But I did mention to the listeners that if you are a business owner or you know someone that has a business that would be interested in sponsoring Grizzly's Cave, you can reach out to me at grizzliescave@yahoo.com. It'll spell out the same as the podcast. The only difference is there is no apostrophe on the email address. It would be greatly appreciated. All right, so let's go ahead and continue on. Before I begin, though, I did some digging. So I mentioned in the previous episode about a promotion called EMLL. Well, EMLL stood for Empresa Mexicana de Lucha Libre. It was founded in 1933. In the 1980s, EMLL became what we know today as CMLL, which stands for Consejo Mundial de Lucha Libre. This was in part due to EMLL leaving the NWA. I honestly did not know that EMLL was part of the NWA. I guess you learn something new every day. Alright, so if I remember correctly, I believe I left off around May of 94. So on May 17th, 1994 at the arena, hopefully I don't butcher this name, Coliseo in Mexico City, Hayabusa would make his EMLL debut in his casual Zubaz pants that he wore casually to the show that night, not expecting to wrestle, as he would team with La Sombra and Ringo Mendoza, as they would defeat the team of Javier Cruz, Panico, and Tornado Negro 1. Hayabusa would begin to finally find success as he would begin to get booked as much as 3 times a day, as he would take Brazo de Oro's spot as the new young flying sensation. On May 27th in Arena Coliseo in Mexico City, Hayabusa would team up with Ciclone Ramirez and Pantera 2 in a losing effort to Mogur, Javier Cruz, and Cachorro Mendoza. The reports on Hayabusa after the match were that he lacked experience in lucha libre style wrestling, but was obviously an incredible athlete from the moves he would deliver. Hayabusa would then make his Arena Mexico debut teaming with Ciclone Ramirez and El Hijo del Solitario to defeat the team of Javier Cruz, Mogur, and Espectro Jr. On June 3rd at Arena Mexico in Mexico City, Hayabusa would team with El Pantera and Ciclone Ramirez, and they would defeat Cachorro Mendoza, Javier Cruz, and Mogur in a 2 out of 3 falls match. He would team with Ciclone Ramirez again, as well as El Hijo del Solitario, as they would defeat Espectro Jr., Javier Cruz, and Mogur on June 17th in Arena Mexico in another 2 out of 3 falls match. On June 22nd in, oh boy, I'm going to try not to butcher this one, Cuernavaca in Morelos, Hayabusa would get to team up with Ultimo Dragon for the first time in his career, as well as La Fiera to defeat the team of Angel Blanco Jr., Los Hijos de Angel Blanco 1 and 2. After Dragon would get the pin, Hayabusa would then team up with the Chicago Express and Americo Roca, as they would lose to Cadáver de Otra Tumba, Espectro Jr., and Javier Cruz on June 24th at Arena Mexico. On July 5th, Hayabusa would team up with Ringo Mendoza and El Hijo del Solitario to defeat Mogur, Jacques Mate, and Tornado Negro at the Arena Coliseo, and Hayabusa would continue to improve in lucha libre style wrestling. On July 15th, he would team with El Hijo del Solitario and Blue Demon Jr. to defeat the team of Jacques Mate, Mocho Cota, and Cachorro Mendoza. Let's see here. The next day, on July 16th, Hayabusa, El Dandy, and Super Astro would lose in Mexico City to the team of Jacques Mate, Mano Negra, and Negro Casas. Hayabusa would team up with Guerrero Imperial, and they would defeat the team of Corazon Salvaje and Guerrero del Fantasma on July the 21st in Cuernavaca, Morelos. And then on another show that same day, Hayabusa, Atlantis, and El Tejano would defeat Bestia Salvaje, Mano Negra, and Pierroth Jr. Hayabusa would then team with Super Astro to enter into a tag team tournament to crown new CMLL tag team champions after the titles were vacated. Their first round opponents would be El Dandy and Negro Casas on July 22nd in the main event of Arena Mexico in front of 8,000 fans. And this was Hayabusa's first ever main event match in his career. Hayabusa and Super Astro would fail to get through the first round after El Dandy and Negro Casas would come away with the victory to advance. Also entering the tournament would be, and some more names that'll ring a bell, the Wild Pegasus, which was the late Chris Benoit, Vampiro, Miguel Perez, the Headhunters, Takashi Okano, and Silver King. The Headhunters would go on to win the tournament and the titles after defeating Negro Casas and El Dandy in the finals a week later. Hayabusa would then team up with fellow Japanese wrestler Nobutaka Araya, as they would team up with El Hijo del Solitario to defeat the team of Bestia Salvaje, Jacques Mate, and this next name, Popi Tekus on July 30th at Arena Coliseo in another 2 out of 3 falls match, and then would team up with Blue Demon Jr. and Ciclone Ramirez and they would lose to Cachorro Mendoza, Mocho Cota, and Mogur on August the 2nd, 1994. Hayabusa would return to Arena Mexico on August the 12th, and he would team up with El Brazo and Brazo de Oro. And he was known to the CMLL fans as the young flying sensation before Hayabusa had come in. And they would lose to Mano Negra, Arcangel de la Muerte, and El Hijo del Gladiator, with Hayabusa again showing growth in the lucha libre style of the match and adding his own moves like the 450 Firebird Splash and the Phoenix Splash. Hayabusa would lose his last match before returning home to Japan after teaming with El Brazo and Pantera 2, and they lost to the team of Javier Cruz, El Hijo del Gladiator, and Gran Marcos Jr. Hayabusa would eventually leave Mexico and return to Japan, and he would make his FMW debut as Hayabusa. But first he would pose for pictures for the Japanese magazine Pro Wrestling Shu in Osaka prior to returning to FMW. And due to leaving right after the show and going back to Mexico, Hayabusa would be brought back and be told that he was being groomed as the new ace of FMW and to establish himself as a main event wrestler. On August the 28th, at the Osaka Castle Hall, Hayabusa would be put in a match against Sabu. Due to the Hayabusa gimmick being patterned after Sabu, and again, as I said on a previous episode about Hayabusa, A.G. Izaki was such a big fan of Sabu's gimmick from his earlier years in FMW. During the match, Sabu would try a dangerous spot of hitting a 450 splash off the top rope to the outside onto a table that Hayabusa had moved out of the way of. And folks, I can already envision the carnage. Unfortunately, Sabu would injure his back during the spot, and Hayabusa would manage to get his first ever Japanese victory under his new Hayabusa gimmick. Sabu would show respect to Hayabusa afterwards by shaking his hand. Hayabusa would also assist Atsushi Onita for the only time under the mask in the main event. Onita, after doing his speech to end the show, which generally after almost all of Onita's matches in FMW when he was the ace, he always did a post-match speech, promo, whatever you want to call it. But during this speech to end the show, Onita would begin spitting water into the crowd. He would also spot Hayabusa near the ring, and he would spit water at Hayabusa. Hayabusa would return to Mexico, and he would participate in a training class of Ultimo Dragons called the Hall of the Dragon. And it was basically a base camp in Mexico City for training on learning high-flying moves. Hayabusa and several other wrestlers, including Chris Jericho, would attend Dragon's trainings, and this would later be the inspiration for him beginning his Toryumon class. Jericho would go up to Hayabusa and ask him about his shooting star press, which Jericho would tell him that he had tried it and had broken his arm after performing the move. Hayabusa and Jericho would begin to incorporate the Asai moonsault in the ring after their training. And for all of you Jericho-holics, you know Jericho's version of the Asai moonsault, known as the lion salt. And Izaki, he was using two Scorpios 450 splash during training. He wanted to come up with something more innovative. he would include a backwards posture before delivering the 450 splash, which was a move nobody had ever done before. Hayabusa would call it what we now know as the Phoenix Splash. On September 6th, Hayabusa wrestled again in Mexico at the Arena Coliseo, and he teamed up with El Brazo and La Fiera, but they would lose to the team of Dr. Wagner Jr., El Gran Marcus Jr., and El Hijo del Gladiator. And then his other team with Atlantis and El Tejano, they would lose again on September the 9th. They would lose to Emilio Charles Jr., Miguel Perez Jr., and Ricky Santana in a 2 out of 3 falls match. We're going to skip ahead just a little bit on this form here that I've been reading from. Hayabusa would team up with Ultimo Dragon as they would enter the Copa Oreo 1994 tournament, but they would end up getting eliminated on October 25th. They were eliminated by the team of Apollo Dantes and El Dandy. Hayabusa would also be informed around this time that he would be returning to FMW for the May 5th show at Kawasaki Stadium for Onita's retirement, as the focus of the promotion would be on Hayabusa because he was being groomed, as I stated earlier, to become the ace of the promotion. The Kawasaki Stadium show every May, if I can remember correctly, it was pretty much similar to like WWF's or WWE's WrestleMania or WCW's Starrcade. Hayabusa would team up with Ultimo Dragon again, and he would enter another tournament for the vacant CMLL tag titles on November 11th. They would defeat the team of Felino and Mano Negra to get past the first round. However, in the quarterfinals, they would be eliminated from the tournament on November the 18th. They would lose to Emilio Charles Jr. and El Santanico. Emilio Charles would win the match after powerbombing Hayabusa. And that team of Emilio Charles Jr. and El Santanico, they would go on to win the tournament. The day before getting eliminated in that tournament, Hayabusa would get the chance to team up with Dos Caras, which, as I stated in a previous episode, is the father of Alberto Del Rio. Dos Caras is the younger brother of Mil Mascaras. And also Hayabusa would team up with Ringo Mendoza, and they would defeat Hombre Bala, MS1, and Pierre Off Jr. Hayabusa and Caras would form a friendship that would go all the way through the rest of Ezaki's life. Dos Caras would send him a Christmas card all the way up to 2015. Ezaki would celebrate his 26th birthday in Mexico City with Chris Jericho, and this doesn't surprise me. Chris Jericho wound up dumping Ezaki's face in the cake. I can already see that happening. Hayabusa would then team up with El Dandy and La Fiera, and they would lose to Black Magic, Norman Smiley, Mano Negra, and Mocho Cota on December the 2nd. Hayabusa would end up suffering his biggest injury at the time after attempting an Asai moonsault to the floor. It was still a new move to him. He wound up slipping off the top rope, and he wound up crashing down to the floor, and he smacked his head pretty hard on the concrete. Eventually, we'll come back to this later. Getting back to Norman Smiley, and if I'm not mistaken, this is the same Norman Smiley that we all knew in WCW, the guy that invented the big wig. He was known as Screaming Norman Smiley. He was hilarious as all get out, but my God, he was a great wrestler. But anyways, getting back to that spot with Hayabusa, it would be a scary spot. However, Hayabusa would go on to recover from it. He would have a severe headache for several days. Basically, he got lucky in this instance. On December 17th, this would be Hayabusa's last match in Mexico. He would challenge Silver King. And I forgot to mention too, I know El Dandy and Silver King had done some work in WCW, particularly I believe in the cruiserweight division. Hayabusa challenged Silver King for the CMLL Heavyweight Championship in a 2 out of 3 falls match. They would brawl all over ringside at the start of the match. Hayabusa failed to beat the referee's count, which led to Silver King getting the first fall win via countout. The second fall, Silver King got DQ'd, and Hayabusa wound up delivering a Fire Thunder powerbomb as well as a moonsault. However, Silver King would come out on top, and he would wind up defeating Hayabusa, and that would be the end of Hayabusa's 15-month stint in Mexico. Hayabusa wound up winning Rookie of the Year for 1994 by the Pro Wrestling Box and Lucha magazine. Hayabusa, even though at the time he was 209 pounds, he wanted to bulk up more to become the ace of FMW and be a true heavyweight, and felt like he was never going to accomplish that in Mexico due to having so many stomach issues with the food that he was consuming. So he would request to go back to the United States and train there for the rest of his stay before returning back to FMW. The attention of Hayabusa would result in being asked to attend a meeting with the head of IWA Japan in Victor Quiñones. He would offer Hayabusa more pay to leave FMW and join IWA Japan, and then he would become the ace of their promotion. Hayabusa would respectfully decline Quiñones' offer. Quiñones did apparently stated to Hayabusa that that he would have the opportunity to have the promotion based around him. And I believe he had also mentioned that if Tarzan Goto was still in FMW when Hayabusa returned back there, that he would never become the ace. Hayabusa would tell Quiñones that he believed that things would work out for him if he remained loyal to FMW. On a personal note, I can respect that. I can respect him wanting to remain loyal to the promotion that he started at. I totally get it. Unfortunately, though, folks, you'll find out later on as this series continues that loyalty will only get you so far. But anyways, in January of 1995, Hayabusa would travel from Mexico City to Tampa, Florida, and he would live with the Gladiator Mike Awesome. They would train together, and allegedly they would consume about 15,000 calories a day. Hayabusa would apparently drink chocolate milk, considering it was inexpensive and high on calories, and supposedly he would drink 4 to 5 liters a day. Folks, that is dedication. For anyone that follows bodybuilding or weightlifting or does bodybuilding or weightlifting, you all will know this when I say that calories are your best friend for bulking up. Personally, I could not consume that much milk of any kind at all due to being lactose intolerant. But even today, chocolate milk is not too terribly expensive, so I mean, I could understand that, and it's not a bad idea. If I'm not mistaken, I believe it was Demolition Axe or Bill Eadie, the Masked Superstar, Super Machine. Supposedly, whenever he was still active, he did a lot of apparently he did a lot of powerlifting, but I believe he had said that he would consume a lot of whole milk as well, for the calorie intake. Or maybe it was Demolition Smash that said that. I do not remember off the top of my head, but it was one of those two. Let's see. Hayabusa would also eat meat and pasta daily. And apparently he would be introduced to steroids by Mike Awesome. That's all alleged. I don't know. Apparently Mike Awesome and Hayabusa would have talks about keeping FMW going, with Onita about to retire in May, and they wanted to have the top rivalry of the promotion, and they also wanted to change the image of FMW from the Onita death matches that it was known for after Onita retired. Hayabusa would work in the Florida independent promotions from January until April of '95. He would wrestle for the Florida Wrestling Alliance, which was Horace Boulder's promotion. You folks will know Horace Boulder as Horace Hogan. He was a member of Raven's Flock when he first debuted in WCW, and then eventually became a part of NWO Hollywood when they had the NWO, I guess you'd say NWO Civil War going on when you had the Wolfpack and NWO Hollywood. But yeah, Horace Hogan, the nephew of Hulk Hogan, brother. At the beginning of Hayabusa's time down there, the fans would laugh at his ring attire, and they would scream at him that he looked like one of the Power Rangers and boo him. Hey now, the Power Rangers, especially back in the 90s, they were badass. However, Hayabusa would end up earning those fans' respect with his moves, the innovative moves that he did. He first debuted the Falcon Arrow, which would get a reaction, and then he would deliver the Phoenix Splash to applause. Many of the fans were stunned by the maneuvers, just with being how impressive they were. He would manage to defeat the Navy SEAL with help from former FMW wrestlers Haystacks Calhoun Jr. and Horace Boulder to become the PCWF Heavyweight Champion in February. He was also receiving praise from his peers in the back from what they were seeing from him. He would wrestle folks such as the Green Beret, Vern Henderson, Bill Garrett, but he would eventually lose the title to Randy Fuller on April the 6th. And this would be Izaki's only match of his career where he would work as a heel against a babyface. The Gladiator would attack Hayabusa afterwards backstage. Pictures would be taken of the Gladiator lifting up Hayabusa and challenging him to a match at Kawasaki Stadium for the return of Hayabusa to FMW. I'm sorry, not for the return, but this would ignite a feud for him in his return to FMW the following month. This would be at the original plan was for this to be at the May 5th Kawasaki show. This would put him at the level of the Gladiator, who had once beat him up so badly as a rookie that he vomited blood. Hayabusa would get informed while in Florida in the spring of '95 that WWF was interested in him having a tryout match. This was due to them not having any Japanese wrestlers on the roster at the time, and they were interested in his look. Hayabusa would convince himself that FMW was his home and should be top priority over his personal dream of wrestling in the WWF, and that his life would be completely different if he were to remain living in a foreign country like America for long term. Hayabusa would decline the tryout, and Jinsei Shinzaki would end up getting that spot on the roster in May of '95. For those of you that don't remember, so the name Jinsei Shinzaki will not sound familiar on a WWF roster, but if you watched the WWF back in the mid-90s, he was the wrestler known as Hakushi. And I don't remember a whole lot about his run there. I do remember he had a really good feud with Bret the Hitman Hart. I did have a chance to watch those two have a cage match in Evansville, Indiana back in the summer of '95. I did cover that on a previous episode of Grizzly's Cave. I had no idea that it could have been Hayabusa instead of Shinzaki. It kind of makes you wonder what if or what could have been. The thing is, back in '95, other than Hakushi's feud with Bret Hart, he didn't really have the best run in WWF, and it wasn't Shinzaki's fault. He was a hell of a worker. He had great matches. He was ahead of his time. The same was can be said also about the Great Muta when Muta was first in WCW. It's just that Shinzaki was never put in the title picture, and he should have been. This was one of the many instances that McMahon dropped the ball on a wrestler. Personally, I think Hayabusa made the right decision, and because you got to remember, Nash was on top. The Clique was still running things around that time frame. Had Hayabusa gone to the WWF, again, this is my personal opinion, I do not believe he would have been there for long. He was not a big guy, and I don't really know how well his English was at that time. In my opinion, I believe he would have been doing the JOB on a regular basis, and I do not believe that Hayabusa would have had any success in the WWF. Here's where it gets ironic. You all remember Al Snow. Well, he had a few gimmicks when he first started in the WWF. The first gimmick he used was Avatar. If you get a chance, look it up on the internet. Type in Al Snow Avatar and look in the images section. You will be in compare Avatar to Hayabusa, and you will be surprised at the resemblance of those two. The only difference is that Al would only wear the mask during his matches. However, he would have the mask off during his entrance and after the match. But anyways, enough of that sidebar. Hayabusa would return to Japan for good on April the 20th, and this was to prepare for his upcoming match against the Gladiator. Hayabusa would look to become the ace of the promotion and top babyface. Shoichi Arai, who was the ring announcer for FMW, he would pick up Ezaki at the airport, and Ezaki would state that he wanted to remain in character as Hayabusa instead of returning as AG Ezaki, and Shoichi Arai agreed with him. So Arai dropped Hayabusa off at a hotel in Ota-ku in Tokyo. Apparently, he stayed in a small, cramped room, nowhere near compared to the hotel that he had stayed at about a year prior for New Japan. Hayabusa would be staying at this hotel for the time being while FMW was finishing their tour leading up to the May 5th Kawasaki Stadium show. Hayabusa would go to visit his girlfriend Harumi, um, and whenever during that visit with Harumi, Hayabusa wound up missing a call from Mr. Ganosuke, and Mr. Ganosuke was looking to speak with Hayabusa about some important information. Unfortunately, Hayabusa was out and he never received the phone call. And also at that time, we didn't have cell phones and whatnot. I mean, you had your old school car phones and whatever, but yeah, he never got the call. Basically, Mr. Ganosuke was trying to call Hayabusa to inform him that Ganosuke and Tarzan Goto were leaving FMW. Apparently, there had been a meeting backstage between Onita and all the FMW wrestlers. However, Tarzan Goto was not invited. Now, I do want to plug this in there. I have heard about this. There is a video. It was called "History of FMW." Very thorough description of all the events that happened. I do not remember the guy's name because it's been about a year and a half since I listened to it, but very informative. And if you get a chance, folks, look up History of FMW. They are very long. They are long videos, but I promise you would not be disappointed. So apparently during this meeting, Onita said that plans would change, or that plans had changed, and that going forward, Hayabusa would become the ace of FMW and not Tarzan Goto. Tarzan Goto was actually considered the number 2 guy in FMW behind Onita, so naturally, or the natural order of selection would be that Goto would be the new ace. Onita would also state that there would be a new system that if any wrestler did not agree with Goto's rules, that they were allowed to challenge Goto's authority if they did not agree with something that he was telling them to do. Allegedly, Goto had a reputation of being a dictator when it came to enforcing the rules with the wrestlers, since that was something Onita did not have time to deal with. And Goto had always been more hands-on with all of the younger wrestlers. Mr. Ganosuke, who had developed a close relationship with Goto as head of the FMW dojo, would get upset at Onita's statement. Goto and Ganosuke, along with Akito Ichihara and Katsutoshi Niyama, would all have a meeting with the future owner of FMW, Shoichi Arai, and Arai stated to them that Onita's word was final, and that is how the promotion was going to operate following the Onita retirement show. In case this does not make any sense, Mr. Arai, the announcer, was going to be in charge of this promotion after Onita retired. I'm not aware of Mr. Arai having any experience whatsoever in running any promotion. Now, I know Mr. Arai is no longer with us, God rest his soul, and I definitely am not going to make any disparaging comments. But if you folks have watched The Dark Side of the Ring, Season 3, Episode 10, episode of Blood and Wire, Onita's FMW, it touches just a little bit on that when Arai became the new owner of the company. Mr. Ganosuke would become so upset over the disrespect of his mentor, Tarzan Goto, that he would state in the meeting that he was quitting FMW with the idea that he would be retiring from wrestling. Goto would state to Ganosuke that if he was going to quit over how he was being treated, that Goto felt that he would need to quit as well. Ichihara would also agree to quit the promotion as well. However, Katsutoshi Niyama decided to remain in FMW. Ganosuke had called Hayabusa before making his decision to follow Goto, but since Hayabusa was unable to get in contact, Ganosuke would just decide to follow his teacher. Go Ito would end up knocking on Hayabusa's door that night and gave him the news that Tarzan Goto, Mr. Ganosuke, and Akito Ichihara were leaving FMW. Ito asked Hayabusa if he would be following the same footsteps as his best friend because, again, folks, keep in mind, Hayabusa and Mr. Ganosuke broke into this business together and they were close friends. Hayabusa would inform Ito that he was going to stay with FMW out of loyalty to Shoichi Arai and the Gladiator. Again, Hayabusa, a very, very loyal wrestler, and I do give him props on that. With Goto leaving FMW, Hayabusa saw this as an opening for him to become the ace of the promotion that he had wanted to be. However, he was unsure of achieving that status if Goto did remain with the company. Goto, Ganosuke, and Ichihara would attend a press conference the next day to announce that they were leaving FMW. Sidebar here on that history of FMW. I won't go into all the details, but it pretty much sounded like a messed up situation with Goto's departure along with Mr. Ganosuke. But I mean, you all can be the judge of that. Alright, so Shoichi Arai would meet with Hayabusa at his hotel, and he brought up changing the lineup at the May 5th show. Instead of facing the Gladiator, Hayabusa would now be put into the main event of the show against Atsushi Onita in Onita's retirement match. Arai would state to Hayabusa right away that he could not win, of course, but that it would be such a high-profile match for him that Hayabusa accepted. I will come back to that shortly. FMW originally announced that Takashi Ishikawa of Tokyo Pro would be in the main event of the match against Onita, with none of the reporters believing that would be the match that FMW would go with. On April the 30th, there was an FMW press conference in Tokyo. Onita and Ishikawa were in the process of signing the contract for their main event match. Well, suddenly Hayabusa would walk into the room before the match could be signed. Hayabusa would come out and kneel in front of them and ask for the match against Onita instead. Onita would get angry and begin screaming at Hayabusa for the interruption. Hayabusa would tell Onita that he would risk his life for FMW and that he would show him if Onita would give Hayabusa the match. Onita would refuse, but Takashi Ishikawa, seeing how eager Hayabusa was for the match, would decide to step down and let Hayabusa have the match, with Onita angrily agreeing to fight Hayabusa for his retirement match instead. Hayabusa would then state, "I can represent the new FMW in a fight to the death at Kawasaki." Hayabusa would take a taxi hours before the show to Kawasaki Stadium to prepare for the biggest match of his life. Hayabusa would be nervous for the entire day leading up to the show. He was worried that it would not go as planned, and over the fact that he had trained over the past year in high flying and now was going to be able to do very little high flying with no ropes in the match. Hayabusa would have special brown ninja pants made for this show, as he had never worn brown before, and a brown outfit would represent a big match for him. Hayabusa would also meet with former FMW dojo friends for the first time at the show, including Katsutoshi Niyama and Masato Tanaka. And they were under the impression that they were going to be pushed with Hayabusa as the new stars of the new FMW. Alright, so the date of the match, May 5th at Kawasaki Stadium. There were 58,250 fans in attendance for this event. The match that Hayabusa and Onita had, it was an exploding ring, no ropes, exploding barbed wire cage death match. This, at this point, was the biggest death match to ever take place at the time. And it was also the biggest match in the history of FMW. As soon as the door closed, Hayabusa would feel afraid. Onita and Hayabusa would shake hands before starting the match. Onita would start off by chopping Hayabusa in the chest and then attempting to grab Hayabusa in a headlock and send Hayabusa into the exploding cage. But every time Hayabusa would manage to stop short of going into the cage, Hayabusa would manage to grab a headlock on Onita. But Onita, seeing his opportunity, would attempt to fling Hayabusa into the cage. However, Hayabusa would manage to hold on to the headlock, bringing Onita with him as both would hit the cage for the first huge explosion. Hayabusa would feel a sensation across his arm and a feeling of his body being burnt more than he had expected. Hayabusa would take a majority of the explosion, as Onita would easily get up first and begin working on Hayabusa's leg. Onita would place Hayabusa in a sharpshooter before modifying it into a single leg crab. The sirens would begin going off, noting 5 more minutes until the ring would explode. Onita would finally let go and put Hayabusa in another headlock, but Hayabusa would shove Onita, breaking the headlock and sending Onita into the cage for another explosion. Hayabusa would take advantage of Onita's fall and would deliver a suplex and then a standing moonsault for the cover, but Onita would kick out. Hayabusa would then put Onita in a figure 4 leg lock, attempting to make Onita submit. Onita would begin screaming in pain due to Hayabusa working on Onita's severe leg injuries that had forced him to retire from wrestling 10 years earlier. But while in the figure 4, Onita would begin slapping Hayabusa in the face and screaming at him, with Hayabusa fighting back with slaps of his own to Onita. Hayabusa would lose concentration of the figure 4, and Onita would manage to break out and deliver a Fire Thunder powerbomb to Hayabusa, with Hayabusa kicking out as the sirens would continue to get louder. Onita would then deliver a DDT, with Hayabusa kicking out. Less than 10 seconds would remain until the ring would explode, when Hayabusa would get up and deliver a spinning heel kick to Onita, and then charge at Onita, but Onita would move out of the way and send Hayabusa into the cage for a huge explosion at the same time the ring would explode. The safest way to protect your body in an exploding cage match is to lay down in the middle of the ring. But Hayabusa would end up being put in the most dangerous position by already hitting the exploding barbed wire at the same time the ring explosions would set off. The explosions would end up leaving scars all over Hayabusa's body. As the smoke of the explosions would clear, the referee, at the time, Goito, would be knocked out from the explosion. One thing about the referees for these matches, they did not wear traditional referee uniform. It was a hazard suit with a mask, helmet, etc. A new referee would enter by the name of Nobuyoshi Nakamura, who would later become the Dragon Kid. Onita would get up and deliver another Fire Thunder powerbomb to Hayabusa, and Hayabusa would still manage to kick out. Onita would attempt another Fire Thunder powerbomb, but Hayabusa would manage to reverse it and turn it into a Hurricane Rana for the pinfall attempt, but Onita would manage to kick out. Hayabusa would deliver his own Fire Thunder powerbomb to Onita. Hayabusa got the motivation to do that from watching Tatsumi Fujinami putting Riki Choshu's finisher, the Scorpion Deathlock, on Riki Choshu. However, Onita would kick out of his own move. Hayabusa would begin climbing to the top of the barbed wire cage that had been deactivated after the explosion. After he climbed to the top, he would do one of the most dangerous spots seen in wrestling at the time and moonsault off the top of the cage. However, Onita would manage to move out of the way, and Hayabusa would hit the mat hard and would deal with a lot of pain. Dust was flying everywhere from the explosion. Onita would get up with blood running down his arms and would deliver another Fire Thunder powerbomb to Hayabusa. Hayabusa would still manage to kick out, to an incredibly loud reaction from the thousands of fans who had started the show chanting for Onita, but they were now chanting for Hayabusa. Onita, not believing that Hayabusa was able to kick out, would deliver another Fire Thunder powerbomb, and then follow it up with another Fire Thunder powerbomb, and then he would finally put away Hayabusa. After the match, Onita would begin pouring water on Hayabusa as a show of respect for the fight that he put on, and also to water down the burns that Hayabusa had suffered. Both Onita and Hayabusa would hold hands as Onita would symbolically be passing the torch of Ace of FMW to Hayabusa. Onita would grab Hayabusa up and attempt to help him to walk before Hayabusa would fall due to the punishment his body had taken. Onita would pick up Hayabusa and walk around the ring while pouring water all over Hayabusa's body as Onita's Wild Thing theme song would be played. Onita's version of Wild Thing was actually Joan Jett's version. A stretcher would be brought to the ring for Hayabusa, and after he would be placed on the stretcher, the loud chants of Onita would begin to become Ezaki chants. Backstage, an incredibly hurt and maskless AG Ezaki would begin to break down in tears from the incredible amount of pain and emotion that he had gone through the match, and would be taken to a nearby hospital to tend to the burns and cuts, and he would need 67 stitches to close them afterwards. Hayabusa attempted everything he could do in one match to show the FMW fans what he was willing to do, just like Onita did, to become the new ace of FMW. Okay, folks. Just a few things. And keep in mind, this is just an opinion, and everyone is entitled to one. The video, when I first came across Hayabusa on YouTube, I really wish I could remember the name of the video, but the first thing it had was that press conference that I mentioned that involved Onita, Ishikawa, and then Hayabusa. However, there were no English subtitles. I just remember after Hayabusa came in and bowed and knelt and was trying to get this match, I just remember Onita getting very aggressive in how he addressed Hayabusa. The emotions and mannerisms told a good story. The young wrestler humbly went before Onita and bowed and knelt before him to have this match. And he got his wish. Now folks, I strongly suggest you watch the match yourselves and you all can be the judge. The match was brutal. I thought it was a good match. Did it have a lot of gimmicks? Yes. But it was unique. It's what made FMW stand out. You did not see things like that stateside. Now, granted, yes, ECW was that extreme rising promotion and everything, but they never had anything like this, at least not to my recollection. Here's the irony of Onita's retirement. Exactly 1 year prior, Onita lost a match to Genichiro Tenryu, and some of you WWE fans, WWF fans will remember Tenryu. He was in a tag team match in WrestleMania 7. Let's see, I'm trying to remember who his partner was. Oh yeah, Koji Katao, and they defeated Demolition in a tag team match. Tenryu was also in the 93 Royal Rumble match. He was also in the 94 Royal Rumble match. And he was also one of the 10 wrestlers that aided Yokozuna in defeating The Undertaker in the 94 Royal Rumble casket match. Anyways, I digress. So, that match that Onita had with Tenryu, if Onita lost, then he would retire. Well, like what we have seen this year with John Cena's retirement tour, Onita himself had a 1 year retirement tour. Now, did Hayabusa have a strong showing? Yes. But he was out of his element, being that he had never been in a match like this before. Plus, he had been working on his Lucha Libre style, and he did not get to showcase as much of that style during this match. As stated earlier, there were no ropes. There were no ropes in this match at all. So, I hate to say this, but the Lucha Libre style went out the window. I understand that it was Onita's retirement match. I get that. However, if you're trying to promote someone as the next ace of the company, you don't have him or her lose that big match. If you're trying to promote someone and they lose, the crowd is not going to get behind that person. To quote one of my best friends, and I hope he hears this, it doesn't make any sense. Me personally, and I said this on my FMW episode that I recorded earlier this year, I believe Onita should have done the honors and did the JOB for Hayabusa. Again, that's just my opinion. Alright, so after this match, Hayabusa is now the ace of the new FMW. Onita's FMW Inc. would become dormant. Hayabusa would begin taking pictures on May 8th, 1995 for mass media and for his name, and to get promotional pictures of him out there. He would take pictures for posters. He would take pictures for Pro Wrestling Weekly while he was at the dojo. He would give an interview in character. It had already sparked a lot of interest to the fans, even if it did not necessarily mean that he was ready to replace Onita as the draw or superstar that Onita had been for years. On May 17th, at the Saitama Fukaya City Gym, although Onita had sold incredibly well for Hayabusa in his retirement match, Hayabusa was still too unknown to help draw for Onita, especially after losing to Onita. Although the crowds were going to be down no matter what due to Onita's retirement and the whole promotion being built around Onita since the beginning, it was hard for many of the hardcore fan base of FMW to believe in Hayabusa and the new FMW. Many of the house shows at the beginning of the new FMW would only draw around 1,000 fans for the show just 12 days after drawing over 58,000. Again, folks, I say, if they're going to keep this going, and if they're wanting to, if they're wanting to keep this promotion going without Onita, and they're trying to build this new ace, Onita should have done the honors. Again, that's just my opinion. Hayabusa would team up with Katsutoshi Niyama to face the Gladiator and Horace Boulder, and would be able to show the FMW fans for the first time his high-flying skills inside and outside of the ring. And he would also debut for the fans a running moonsault off the top rope to the outside. However, when he was climbing the top rope for a Phoenix Splash, he would be caught by the Gladiator, and he would be hit with a running awesome bomb, with the Gladiator scoring the victory. After the match, Ricky Fuji would call out Hayabusa and question his ability to become the ace of FMW, and that FMW was at its weakest, and his group consisting of Mr. Pogo, the Gladiator, Hisakatsu Oya, himself, and Horace Boulder, they would take over what was left of Tarzan Goto's Lethal Weapon faction. Alright, folks, well, I think I'm going to end that here for tonight. Thank you all again for your support. If you listen to this video, please give it a like and subscribe. And folks, this is Grizzly Andrew signing off, saying take care and God bless.